Buenos días. Pues vamos a empezar. Antes de nada, no me conocéis, ¿quién es este señor? Pues yo soy Juan Pecur, os envié el otro día el mensaje. Ya sabéis que Julian Ingelis, ha tenido una urgencia familiar, se ha tenido que ir a Italia. Esta semana pues no está con nosotros y yo he venido un poco... Yo soy el coordinador de todo el área de las asignaturas de teoría, de estructura, entonces me encarga un poco de, pues eso, de suplirla en la medida de lo posible. Ayer, en principio, hubiera ido al aula, pero no he podido porque tenía también clases en otro sitio, en periodismo. Pero en principio, por lo que comenta Juliana, pues la semana que viene pues, se normalizará la situación. Cualquier información que tenga, os la pasaré. ¿De acuerdo? Pero bueno, aquí estamos básicamente para otra cosa. La presentación, tenemos una interesantísima ponencia por parte del profesor Marcin Gońda. Marcin Gońda es profesor del Instituto de Sociología de la Universidad de Lodz, ¿vale? Es un experto en temas de migraciones. Juliana Ingelis, como sabéis, también es una experta en esta cuestión y seguro que la habéis trabajado en la asignatura. Es también el director del Centro de los Estudios de Migración de la Universidad de Lodz, ¿vale? Y ha trabajado, lleva muchos años trabajando cuestiones de migración en Polonia, cuestiones de migración en los expaíses de la Unión Soviética, procesos de migración en los países del centro de Europa. La ponencia que va a dar hoy en día, pensamos que es una ponencia de muchísimo interés vinculada al conflicto ucraniano y se va a centrar sobre todo en los procesos de migración, los movimientos de población que se están dando vinculados a la guerra de Ucrania y cómo las poblaciones están, pues bueno, un porcentaje muy amplio están yendo a Polonia y las implicaciones que esto está teniendo, ¿no? Cuáles están siendo las dinámicas, cómo se están, hasta qué punto se están integrando estas personas en el mercado laboral de Polonia, qué papel está teniendo el sistema educativo. Entonces yo creo que puede ser, es un caso hoy en día muy paradigmático de los procesos migratorios, digamos, impuestos por situaciones bélicas que podrían, ¿no? Que seguro que podemos establecer comparaciones con otros procesos similares. Y bueno, yo sin más dejo la palabra al profesor Marcin Gońda y vamos a disfrutar de esta ponencia presentación. Gracias.
All right. Hello. As it was said, my name is Marcin Gońda. I come from Poland. Unfortunately for you, maybe, the seminar will be in English. Unfortunately, I do not speak Spanish at all. If something is not clear to you, if you do not understand something, just let us know and maybe you will somehow help us. But still, I do hope that it will go smoothly. If you do have any questions in the meantime, of course, you may ask them. You may interrupt me simply and then ask the question. But still, in the end, there will be also some time to ask questions, so it's up to you, okay? If you want me to ask a question, please do it. I was informed that this seminar is introduction to sociology, as far as I understand, right? But we have here students here and in the virtual room, so to say, students of not only sociological courses but also political sciences, right? My presentation here will be somehow related to these two disciplines, two sciences. And it is, I believe, important, the thing what I'm gonna say about migration to Poland and CEE. CEE stands for Central and Eastern Europe, because this is very interesting from sociological point of view, but also political point of view, new phenomenon that takes place in Europe. because this area of Europe was previously a country that would, area that would rather send migrants, right? So there were many people coming from Poland, from I don't know, Czech Republic, from Slovakia, to other European countries or to I don't know, America. But now we are observing another phenomenon, that people are rather coming to this country. So this is also interesting to compare what is happening in Central and Eastern Europe, and for instance in Spain, right, which is a experienced immigration country. So I will try to do some comparisons between Poland, between Central and Eastern Europe and Spain. And this is also important for sociology students because, well, if we look into history of sociology, as a science, we would say that migration studies were, or studies about migrants were the ground topic for development of sociology. For instance, if you look at, maybe you've heard about Chicago School, for instance, right? How the sociology developed in America in the beginning of 20th century. These were the studies about integration of migrants, we would say, right? So now we can also have this this topic more contemporary, that refers to the present times. So let's go further. Again, if you have any questions, if you do not understand something, just let me know. Okay. Okay. So what I will talk about. So first, let me introduce my country and my university. Then I will talk about migration processes in Poland and Central Eastern Europe. Then I will talk about what has happened after Russian invasion of Ukraine, because it was a groundbreaking experience, not only because of the political aspect of it, not because how the political situation in Europe has changed or in the world as a result of it, but also from this migration point of view. Then I will talk about policy responses to this refugee crisis, and finally some references to one of studies we have conducted that refers to the integration of Ukrainians in Poland. Okay, so let me first give you some information about Poland, about my city. Maybe you've heard about it, maybe not, but actually this is fourth largest city in Poland. Of course, you probably heard about Warsaw, about Krakow, and other places, but our city may be not well known, but very big in Polish terms. It's the fourth largest, and actually the population is quite similar to the population of Valencia. It's around 800,000 people living there. It's located in the middle of Poland, in the center of Poland, around 120 kilometers from Warsaw. As I said, the fourth largest city. And what might be interesting is the fact that Lodz means in Polish language a boat, which maybe sounds funny, but literally it is boat. But what is interesting is the fact that we do not have any kind of ship yards or any kind of relations to the seaside. We even do not have any large river in the city, but the name comes from this word boat. It was textile industry city, the largest in this area of Europe during the 19th and 20th century. Now it's more diverse when it comes to economy, not only textile industry, but also other industries, IT sector, and other issues like that. So about my university was established just after the Second World War. It has around 36,000 students, quite a lot of academic teachers, also substantial number of international students. And it is one of the biggest and highest ranked universities in Poland. We also do have quite a lot of international students, also Erasmus exchange students, including students from Spain, because I don't know if you know that Spanish students are those who are using the Erasmus exchange program the most frequently among all Europeans, which is somehow interesting. So if you decide to go to take this opportunity and go to Erasmus exchange program, you may also come to Poland, as many Spanish students do. Please do it, come to Poland. Poland is different than any other country, I don't know, surrounding Spain. Like it's different than France, different than Italy, totally different culture, totally different weather. Maybe not so nice as here, but they are also those who are coming during winter to Poland, right, to experience difficult weather. So if you would like to, please come. Me personally, I represent, as it was said, Center for Migration Studies, because I'm most interested in this migration phenomenon, which is, as I said, a growing issue in Poland. So I will mostly focus today on so-called Visegrad Group. Visegrad Group is a group of 4 countries in Central and Eastern Europe: Poland, Czech Republic, Slovakia, and Hungary, that somehow cooperate with each other. Visegrad comes from the place in Czech Republic, and this is somehow related, so that it expresses cooperation. But mostly, to be frankly, of course, I will focus on Poland because this is what I know the most. So let me first give you some information about what is happening in Poland. Poland is, of course, the largest country in this area, and one of the largest countries of European Union, right? Quite in terms of the territory and in terms of population, is a bit smaller than Spain, but it is among the largest countries of European Union, right? So around 38 million people living in Poland currently. But on the other hand, we are facing the so-called depopulation, right? So the population is shrinking, it's getting smaller and smaller, and as a result of it, many people are coming to Poland, because Poland currently is not only one of the largest countries, but it is also the fastest developing country in Central, not even in Central, but in general in Europe. If you go into some economic details, like the rates of economic development, Poland is the fastest growing country in European Union currently. And as a result of it, it is becoming more and more attractive for immigrants, right? It wasn't like that through history, because as you might heard before, and as I said before, Poland through its history was mostly an emigration country. So people were mostly leaving Poland. So for instance, in 19th century, in 20th century, there were people going out of Poland to another countries, simply looking for jobs, right? It was similar in other countries of this area. As a result of it, as I said, on the one hand, Poland is inhabited by around 38 million people, but at the same time, there are around 20 million people who live in the so-called Polish diaspora. So people who live outside of Poland, who have some Polish origins or who claim to be Polish, but they live outside of Poland, right? They mostly live in USA. There are around 10 million Polish people living in USA. But we have also a substantial number of Polish people living in Brazil, around 2 to 3 million Polish people, and also in Western Europe, as we call it, in Western Europe, so mostly in Germany, in UK, and in France, and in Ireland. But also there are some people who live in Spain. All in all, in other European Union countries, there are around 2 to 3 million Polish people. They mostly came there after 2004 when Poland joined the EU. So all in all, as I said, this is the map showing the dispersion of Polish people around the world. The darker color, the darker red color, the more Polish people. As you can see, mostly in America and in Western Europe and in Brazil. So this was the history, because as I said, during the 19th and 20th century, Poland was a poor country with difficult history. As you know, we Polish people like to bitterly laugh in what political situation we are, because our history was always a history of being invaded, right? We were either invaded by Germans, or on the other hand, we were either invaded by Russians, because we were always in this middle position between Russians and Germans, and it was always a trouble situation. Now it's different. Now Poland is developing fastly. It's not a poor country anymore, and as a result of it, we are transforming into immigration country. What does it mean that we are an immigration country? It means that on the one hand, those who have left Poland, and whenever I'm talking about Poland, you may also refer it to another Central and Eastern European countries, because it's a very similar situation there. So whenever those countries are changing from emigration country to immigration country, it refers not only to Poland but also another countries of this area. So what does it mean that Poland and other countries are transforming into immigration country? It means that those who have left those countries, or at least Poland, through past decades, they haven't returned. So people decided to stay, for instance. I don't know, those who left Poland 20 years ago, they mostly stay in UK, in Germany, and other countries. But since those countries are developing fastly, and at the same time they are facing depopulation, which means that less and less nationals are, we are having less and less people being born in those countries, and the economy is developing fastly, it means that we need new people to come there to work, simply, right? So, as I said, Poland is the fastest growing country in terms of its economy. So there is a need for new laborers, for new people who would work in the local labor market. In other words, there is a massive demand for labor force in Poland. I said that Poland is the fastest developing country, and one of the examples for that would be unemployment rate, right? Because if you talk about economic development of given country, you may refer to different things. For instance, you may refer to the rate of unemployment, right? What is the unemployment rate in Spain now? What do you think? What would be 8%, 9%, 10%? I'm talking about general population, not about the young ones, because we know that especially with getting job by young people is difficult in Spain, right?
Yeah.
Maybe it's getting better than it used to be 10 years ago, but it is said, according to some different statistics, that unfortunately for Spanish young people it's more difficult to get a job than, for instance, than Polish young people, right? So all in all, unemployment rate in Poland is 3%. It's very low. It's the second lowest in EU. It wasn't like that. 20 years ago it was the opposite. And that was the reason why so many people left 20 years ago. So many people left Poland 20 years ago. Now it's really a big demand for labor force. The unemployment rate is low. Since Poland is, it isn't so much attractive country, not in terms of economy, but in terms of, I don't know, territorial position or, I don't know, weather conditions and other conditions. It wasn't so much attractive. Now it was mostly those who were coming from not necessarily I don't know, Spain or Germany or France, but there were mostly people who were coming from so-called Eastern Europe or Asian countries, or in other words from post-Soviet Union countries. You know, Soviet Union was a big country, the biggest in 20th century in terms of territory. As a result of collapse of Soviet Union, there were a number of countries who that pop up, right? Successor of Soviet Union is Russia, of course, but there were also Ukraine, Belarus, and others. So mostly from these countries, people are coming today to Poland. And let me just give you some details about it. So, for instance, if you look at information on Eurostat. Eurostat is a statistical office of the European Union, and of course, when we talk about migration to particular countries, we may look at different statistics, right? And we will also talk about it today. That show us what people and in what numbers they are coming to particular countries. But the problem with migration is that it's usually difficult to count migrants. We do not know, and probably, for instance, Spanish government also do not know how many migrants are living in Spain. And there are different reasons for that. One of the reasons is that we are living in a so-called Schengen area, right? Which means that the exchange of people between countries, it's quite easy, right? So it's quite easy to come from Spain to France. And as a result of it, in a given moment, we do not know how many migrants or how many people in total are staying in a given country. So it's difficult to count migrants. It's difficult to count how many people are living in a given country. But of course, there are some statistics that at least give us some kind of a hint how many migrants we have. So one of the statistics that are used to express how many migrants we have in a given country is the so-called first residence permit registered. What does it mean, first residence permit? So whenever a migrant is coming to a given country, the person must the person must explain why he or she is coming, right, to the given country. In other words, that person must receive a kind of a permission to stay in a given country, right? And let's look how it was in 2021, so 5 years ago. First residence permit means that expresses the number of people who registered in a given country for the first time, right? So let's look at the statistics. So for instance, in 2021, in the whole European Union, I mean, there are around 3 million people who registered for the first time, right? 3 million people. Around 1/3 of them, and sorry, this statistics referred to the so-called third nationals. Third nationals are those who are not from the other European Union country, right? So it refers to those who are coming out of European Union. So there were 3 million people in 2021 who registered for the first time when they entered the given European Union country. Among those 3 million people, almost 3 million people, 1/3 was registered in Poland and around 300,000 in Spain in 2021. So, for instance, if we talk about, so what does it mean? It means that Poland at that time was the most attractive country for migrants to come. It might be quite surprising because if you would ask a single person in European Union what is the most attractive country, probably they would give, I don't know, they would say it's Germany, it's France, it's Spain, it's Italy, right? But actually the numbers showed that 5 years ago, the Poland was the most attractive, at least for migrants to come to work, right? So it was almost 1 million people who registered for the first time in Poland at that time. In Spain, it was 370,000. Look at the numbers, what happened, for instance, in Germany, 180,000. In France, 280,000. And in other countries with smaller numbers. But the total number is not, the interesting thing is, it's not only the total number, how many people registered for the first time, but also the reasons why the people are coming to particular countries. And for instance, Eurostat is counting the reasons why people are coming. So for instance, you have here family reasons, education reasons, employment reasons, and other reasons. What does it mean, family reasons? Family reasons means that people are coming to join their families that already live in a given country. So for instance, among that who came to Spain at that time, almost half of them came to Spain because of family reasons. So they joined those who already lived in Spain, right, at that time. For education reasons, 50,000. So in other words, those who are coming mostly to study at the universities, but also in the secondary schools, but mostly university students. And finally, employment. And other are refugees and others. So, and now let's look at the situation in Poland and let's compare it with Spain. It's not only about total numbers, but also proportions, right, between them, shares between them. So for instance, as I said, in Spanish case, in 2021, almost half of people came because of family reasons, whereas in Poland, it was totally different. Among those almost 1 million people who were registered for the first time, almost 800,000, so 80%, came because of employment, right? For family reasons, not so many of them. How would you explain that? Why? What do you think? What was the reason that those reasons were so different? What do you think? Why was that like that? What do you think?
Podéis intervenir y yo traduzco, si tenéis problemas con el inglés.
Difficult to say, right? Well, I would say that this is because of immigration stage countries are at the moment. Poland is a new immigration country. So there are new people are coming. New people are coming. Whereas Spain is not a new immigration country, right? Spain, a big immigration started when? In 1990s, probably, as far as I know, more or less, right? Of course, through the history, it was also there are people coming. But when we are talking about big numbers, the big numbers started in 1990s. Yeah, 1990s, right? So people were coming, let's say, in 1990s. They were staying here. And then new people are coming who already have families in Spain, right? And this is the reason why there are those big differences, for instance, between Spain and Poland. To Poland, there are new people coming, new people who do not have any networks, who do not have any families, whereas in Spain, more and more people are coming who already have some networks here, right? Who established some networks before. So, for instance, their families, their grandparents or their parents came in 1990s or in early 2000s, and now their kids, their families are joining them. That's the answer. But when we ask this question, we have also some interesting sociological and also demographic or economic observation, which means that once migration starts to a given country, it normally doesn't stop, right? So it means that once immigration was initiated, let's say to Spain, it will, with bigger or lower numbers, continue in the next decades, in the next years, right? Because in the beginning there might be people who come for simply work, but in the next decades there will be new people coming, not necessarily only for work, but also, for instance, to join the families already living there, right? So we would say that migration is a never-lasting process. Of course, we can imagine a situation when the country is closing the borders, but actually it's difficult, right, to do it. On the other hand, and we do not have much examples of that. Of course, we have some authoritarian countries, like, I don't know, Northern Korea or some other countries like that are totally closed, and not new people are coming. But basically, in a globalized world, it's difficult to control the movement of people like that, right? So once immigration starts, it continues in the next years and in the next decades. So it was 5 years ago, but situation has changed since then. Poland was, as I said, during the past years, the most popular country for immigration, and it was especially in the since 2018 till and I would say 2023 to 2024. But now the situation is different. What do you think? What is the country that now attracts migrants the most in Europe? It's not Poland anymore. What is the country now, currently? What do you think? What is the most attractive country for immigrants now in Europe? What do you think? No. Second chance? No. No. Okay. Spain. Actually, these are the numbers for 2024. These are the numbers, the most complete. We also have some details from Eurostat for 2025, but they are not completed. So let's look how it was in 2024. So Spain is a country that where the biggest number of so-called first residence permits are issued. I will later on say what happened, but I just wanted to show you that this migration is a very unstable also process, right? So one year there is a big immigration to Poland, another year there is a big immigration to Spain, right? Why is that? What do you think? What has happened that, for instance, through the past years it was Poland, now it's Spain? What do you think? How can we explain that?
Because it's near? What do you mean? ¿Qué quieres decir? Spain is near to other countries that
immigrants, so that are more population that the immigrants. Que hay países, o sea, que hay países...
Emisores, quieres decir.
Sí, de que personas que emigran de esos países.
Y que están cerca de España, por ejemplo. She's saying that it's because immigrants come to Spain from countries which are close to Spain.
But as far as I know, people who are coming to Spain are not from countries that are close, but because they are mostly coming from what countries?
Africa. Bueno, continent, Africa.
Africa.
I don't know.
South America.
South America.
Which is, of course, not close territorially. It's not close geographically, but it's close what? In what terms?
But
cultural and cultural, right? And political also somehow, right? Because as far as I know, Spain is maintaining some relations with South America, right? So as we can see, it's not always about I don't know, territory, the territorial aspect. Not always space, not always is the most important, but also some other reasons, right? And it's changing like that. In other words, it's because some I don't know, policies are important, right? So or some political situations are changing. And we will come back to it later, but please remember that the situation in Europe is changing. Almost every year the situation is different, right, in terms of migration, because one year it might be Poland, another year it might be Spain, and maybe next year it will be Germany or another country, right? But in general, of course, there are some tendencies. It's not that it's so different. As I said, between 2018 2023, Poland was the most popular country. Now, for the moment being, it's Spain, but next year it might be different, right? Okay, but let's go further. We'll come back to it later. Because, as I said, Poland is a country, or Central and Eastern Europe are countries that, surprisingly, to some extent, became very attractive to migrants. But among those migrants, we have different types of migrants, right? What do you think? What kind of migrants we can distinguish? What are the reasons people are coming to new countries? What do you think? Work, of course, this is the main reason. And this is a typical migration, right? Reason. People are moving to another country simply to look for jobs, right? Because, for instance, they are not satisfied with the situation they have at home, right? And this is a typical situation. And of course, we would say there are some statistics, global statistics, showing that around 90% of global migration is caused of price differences and salaries differences between countries. It means that I can get better money for the job I can normally do in my country than I do in my country. So I can move to another country, right? So for instance, I'm a plumber or I'm a carpenter or whatever, but I'm not getting satisfactory work, satisfactory salary, so I would go to another country to get one, to get better, right? And this is the reason why most of the people are going to another countries. It is estimated that around 90% of migrants in the world are moving because of work, because they want to, in other words, get a better job. Another 10% are those who move either because of education or more and more because of generally speaking politics, right? When I'm talking about politics, I'm mostly talking about the so-called refugees, right? Who are refugees? Yes, exactly. And actually, there is a, as you can see it here, because I'm here. It's what I'm calling, what I'm showing is there are different types of so-called international protection. It will be clear in a moment. But as I said, basically people are moving because of work, but and we would say that these people who are moving to another country because of work, they are so-called voluntary migrants. They do it because they want to do it, in other words, right? So for instance, they are not forced to do it, but they want to do it because they want to improve their situation, right? Because, for instance, they do not get good jobs, they do not get good salaries, and they want to move to another country to simply improve their situation. But, so this is the so-called voluntary migration, right? Voluntary. I go abroad because I want to do it. But, of course, on the other hand, we have also so-called forced migrants. Forced migrants are those who are forced to go abroad because of, as one of your colleagues said, because of different reasons. Because, for instance, they are forced to do it because of war, or because they are persecuted. What does it mean that they are persecuted? They suffer because of different reasons. For instance, they are members of some religious groups, or they are members of some ethnicities, they are members of some minorities, or they are members of some political groups. Do you know any examples of this kind of situation? Do you know any examples of some refugees? Like in Spain or in other countries?
We have people from Arabic countries.
Yeah. Like, for instance, there is a war in Syria, right? Or there is a war in Gaza, in Israel, right? Or in other countries of this area in Middle East. And people are going out of these countries, right? They are escaping those countries. They are running out of those countries, right? Because they are persecuted, because they are afraid of their lives, simply, right? And generally speaking, these are the refugees, so-called, right? But this is a general term, refugee, because according to the international law, there are different types of forced migrants, right? And for instance, in Poland, or in Europe, we have basically three types of so-called protection, international protection. What does it mean, international protection? there are different conventions, there are different agreements between countries, and according to those agreements, countries are supposed to protect those who escape to those countries. So for instance, let's say that people from Syria, or I don't know, people from Gaza, or in Polish case, people from Ukraine are escaping those countries to another countries, to neighboring countries, and they look for protection, right? And according to the international law, those countries should protect them. What does it mean, protect them? To guarantee them some basic support, right? In other words, those people are allowed to stay in this country and receive some support, some money, some access to some basic services, I don't know, basic to accommodation, and so on, right? So this is a so-called international protection. But there are different types of international protection, and basically in European or in global international protection scheme, we can basically distinguish three main examples. First is the so-called refugee status, is the full version of protection. It is a situation when person is receiving quite substantial support. So permits to stay, access to services, some money to live. But also there is so-called subsidiary protection also in European Union, which means that this is basically just a permit to stay without much protection, without much support. So in other words, a person is legally staying in this country, but do not receive any support. And it's actually, it doesn't have some expiry date, so the person can stay in a given country as long as he or she wants. And finally, we have also a so-called tolerated stay, which is the third type. It's also similar, but it's only for a given period of time, right? So European Union countries can give different types of protection. All in all of those people who receive this protection, we call them refugees, but to be precise, it's only one type that, according to the so-called Geneva Convention, is called refugee. Nevertheless, this is a group of people who are also growing, and as I said, it is assumed that around 10%, more or less 10% of global of migrants currently are those who receive international protection, but the number is growing year by year. So we have, on the one hand, as I said, voluntary migrants, those who basically go to another country because of work, right? And another situation is those who move to another country because of being persecuted because of war. So in other words, those who are under international protection. But there is also another reason why more and more people are moving. Do you know it? It is more and more people are paying attention to a new reason for migration. Why also people are moving? What do you think? Sorry? Weather conditions, right? Of course. The people are called climate migrants, or mostly, right? What does it mean? Weather. What does it mean? Okay, so you are talking about some retired English or German people or Dutch people who are coming to Spain and enjoy enjoy the sun. Of course, this is a probably a substantial number, but the direction might be also the opposite. Because, for instance, I don't know if you've heard what is happening in Africa. People are leaving Africa not only because of the situation that there is no job, or there are some political tensions and people are persecuted, but also because of the worsening weather conditions. What does it mean? There is less and less access to water, for instance, right? Less and less access. And it's not only in Africa, but it's also going towards north, right? And there are some predictions that in 50 or 60 years, Spain also would be not so much a friendly place to live because of growing temperature, less and less access to water, and so on and so on. And it is especially crucial for agriculture, right? Because if there is no water, of course, local governments could try to provide access to water to those who live in the cities, but without, and probably it is somehow possible to do it. But for instance, without water, there is no agriculture, right? And if there is no agriculture, there is no production of food. If there is no production of food, then there is not possible to survive simply, right? So climate migrants are this new growing group of migrants, and it's not about those old English or German people who are moving to enjoy Spanish beaches, but those who are going different direction, right? And it is a growing issue, and the tension that Africa is, the pressure that the Africa is making on Europe, and for instance Spain, is of course a combination of different factors, right? On the one hand, as I said, there is a not so good economic situation in African countries, not so good political situation in African countries, but also less and less positive weather conditions in Africa, right? Droughts, less and less access to water, right? So people are looking for new possibilities, and they are moving more and more to the north, right? So, but we are not talking about climate migration today. But of course, if you want, you can ask more questions about it later. But let me first come back to Central and Eastern Europe. So, as I said, Poland and Central and Eastern Europe is becoming more and more attractive country, not only for work reasons, but also because since it is more and more attractive, it is also more and more attractive for so-called asylum seekers. Asylum seekers are people who are looking for asylum. In other words, they are looking for international protection, right? And we can observe it also in Poland. So besides migrants who are coming for work, those 100,000 of people every year, there is also a growing number of people who are looking for asylum. Sorry, this chart here is in Polish, but I will just explain it. This is the number of people who are looking for asylum in Poland in particular months of particular year. So here you've got 2017, 2018, 2020, and so on until 2024. So, so for instance, 2,000 people are looking for asylum in 2022, in one of the months of 2022. So we can see that this number is changing, but on the other hand, we can see that the number is also growing month by month, right? What does it mean? That again, it means that Poland is not only attractive, or Central and Eastern Europe countries are not only attractive because of economic situation, but also as a place where people can excuse me, can get asylum, can get protection. And of course, the situation is getting more and more similar to what is happening in so-called Western Europe. And of course, when we are talking about refugees or asylum seekers in Europe, we have to come back to 2015, to the so-called European migrants or European refugee crisis. Crisis not, when I'm talking about crisis, it's not that I'm talking about that is something unusual happens, but I mean that crisis is a situation when the parties that are involved in a situation cannot solve it, right? And it makes a crisis. So what happened in 2015, so 11 years ago, as you might remember? So there was as a reasons of the so-called Arab Spring and also war in Syria, a number of people were trying to escape, mostly African, but to the biggest extent Middle Eastern countries, and get to Europe, right? To get to the European Union. And there were different routes, mostly through Turkey to Balkan countries, and then to Central Europe. Of course, from Africa to Spain, and from Africa to Italy. Of course, those numbers were different on those different routes. But since then, we would say that Europe is facing this pressure, right? Pressure, of course, is a negative term, but I'm talking about pressure not only in relation to the expectations of the societies, but also reaction of the local politicians. And of course, countries are reacting in a different way. Spain is, as far as I know, the only country in Europe currently that has more left-wing, so to say, government. Probably the only country in Europe, whereas in the rest of the Europe we are observing the totally different direction, right? That most governments are so-called far or at least right-wing governments, right? And many are claiming that the reasons why right-wing politicians are getting more and more popularity, that more and more people are voting for right-wing politicians, is immigration, right? Of course, Spain is showing that you can solve it in a different way. That also in the situation of growing migration pressure, you can also vote for left-wing governments, but generally in the rest of Europe is different. And it's the same in France, right? The same in UK. Brexit was founded, or the reasons for Brexit was also growing anti-immigrant movement. The same is in Germany, and the same is in Poland, right? So besides Spain, basically in whole Europe, governments and societies are getting more and more right-wing. Later on, if you like, we can discuss it how it is, because Spain is showing that you can do it in a different way than rest of Europe. But let's come back to what has happened in 2015. So there was this European migrant crisis, and at that time, when there was this growing pressure on European countries, those countries were reacting in a different way. So, for instance, most of those migrants at that time who were coming to Europe, because the biggest number was that as it is shown here, were coming from Middle East through Balkan countries to Central Europe, mostly to Germany, right? Because Germany was always a country that is supposed to be the most attractive, the most developed, and most of those migrants were trying to get to Germany. Of course, quite a lot of also to Spain, to Italy, but mostly the people were coming to Germany. And it is shown here, the bigger circle, the bigger number of asylum claims. So the bigger number of people who were asking for asylum at that time. So it was in 2015 like that. Most of the people were trying to get to Germany. At that time, in Central Europe, it wasn't like that. At that time, Central Europe was not so much attractive. Of course, quite a lot of people were asking for asylum in Hungary, but the reason why they were doing it in Hungary was that, so in a Central and Eastern Europe country, the Visegrad country, but the reason why they were doing it because it was a transit country, right? So people were going through Turkey, Balkan countries, then through Hungary. In the end, they wanted to get to Germany. But since Hungary was the first country, they had to do it. They had to ask for the asylum there. So that is why the circle in Hungary is so big. But in other countries like Poland, like Czech Republic, like Slovakia, like the so-called Baltic states, so Estonia, Latvia and Lithuania, the numbers were far smaller at that time. And in 2015, in Poland and in other countries of Europe, nobody was thinking about migration, nobody was thinking about asylum seekers, and it was like that only 10 years ago, right? But since then, a lot has happened. And mostly what has happened is that in 2021 we could observe what in Poland we call it a hybrid war with Russia. What is a hybrid war? What is a hybrid war? Do you know this term? Have you heard about it? Have you heard about this term? Hybrid war? A hybrid war is not a war that is taking place using typical means, typical weapons, like, I don't know, tanks, guns, and so on, but is using unusual means. So, for instance, cyber attacks, right? Or terrorism, right? This is a hybrid war. So you are causing tension in your neighbor country using unusual means, right? And for instance, I know that maybe from Spanish perspective, it's not probably the most concern of Spanish people. But for instance, in Central and Eastern Europe, the biggest concern is what the neighboring country of Russia will do to us, not necessarily invading us using tanks, using guns or nuclear power or whatever, but in what way they will cause troubles, for instance, using cyber attacks, using terrorism, or using migrants. Because it appears since 2021 that migrants can be also a weapon in the so-called hybrid war. And now I will try to explain it. What do we think about it? Because in 2021 there were national election in Belarus. Yeah, Belarus is a country small to neighboring country to Poland, an ally country or a proxy country to Russia, right? Here, and it is supposed to be well, not supposed, but it is simply a neighboring country to Poland. And as I said, and this Belarus is a bordering country not only with Poland here, but also this is also a if you look at the map, this is also a kind. Here is Russia, a part of Russia, so-called Kaliningrad region. But there is Lithuania, Latvia, and here also Estonia, right? So the Baltic countries. So Belarus is neighboring with those countries. And now, since 2021, when there were elections in Belarus, and elections were corrupted ones, and they were faked elections, right? Again, the authoritarian regime of Lukashenko is still governing Belarus since then. Those countries of Central Europe started to oppose it, started to support Belarusian opposition, saying that there is no time for that. Those who were really voted should run the country. But of course, since it is not a democratic country, the authoritarian regime persisted. And as a result of it, it is said that Russia supported Belarus in using migrants in this hybrid war with Poland, with Baltic countries, in war with European Union. What does it mean? It means that people are transported from Middle Eastern countries. They were transported from Middle Eastern countries and transported to the borders of Poland, Lithuania, Latvia, and Estonia to some extent, but mostly Latvia, Lithuania, and Poland. They were transported, people on the borders, so that they would force the borders of Poland and those countries. And let me just show you how it looks like. So there are people who appear immediately in the middle of 2021 on the border of Poland and Belarus. Immediately. It is not, because normally when we have some kind of a migration routes, they are developing slowly, right? So people are moving, they are choosing some particular routes, and they started to cross the borders. But here it was a different situation. People were transported shortly, immediately, and moved to the Polish border, and they were started to force the border, right? And here you can see the situation on the Polish border. Here are the Polish border guards and policemen, and here are those people who were transported to the border of Polish and Belarusian border. So we have a kind of a situation similar to what is happening in of course in Spain and also in Italy, right? But the difference is that it is totally organized by unfriendly neighboring country. So until 2021, and this is, as I said, a moment when Poland is the most attractive country to Europe, the most attractive immigration country in Europe. At the same time, and more people are coming to work. At the same time, Belarus is organizing a group of people who are trying to cross the border and do it forcibly. So, for instance, as a result of it, we have a kind of a paradoxical situation in Poland at that time, to 2021, when on the one hand there are a lot of people coming to work. As I said, Poland was the most popular country at that time, and at the same time we have a small number of people who are trying to cross the border with Belarus, with unfriendly country, but are not allowed to come because they are their movement is organized by unfriendly neighbor, right? Those people were transported from Middle East to border with Poland. As a result of it, Poland, thanks to the EU funds, built a fence. And actually, this is a kind of a good example what is also happening in the world, because we know that Poland, that world is globalizing, and we are supposed to open. We are supposed to enable the free movement of people, but at the same time we are observing that more and more fences, more and more walls are being built in the world, right? And Europe is of course a good example of that. And of course we have on the one hand walls like, I don't know, in Gaza, right? Israel, what Israel did to Gaza, right? That they built walls like that. But walls are also being built on the external borders of European Union. Like this is a border now, a wall, a fence built on the Polish-Belarusian border. This is an example of the situation when European Union is under pressure, not only is under pressure of migrants who are used as a mean in a hybrid war. So this is a 2021. And then what happened? So we have a kind of a complicated situation in Europe. And then another new thing happened. In 2022, the Russian assault on Ukraine, right? 2022, Russian assault on Ukraine in February 2022. And it was, of course, as I said in the beginning, not only a new thing from political point of view, but also from the migration point of view. As a result of Russian aggression or Russian attack on Ukraine, it initiated the largest movement of people in Europe after the Second World War. So since 1945, there was no larger movement than the one that was initiated by Russian assault on Ukraine. It is estimated, Ukraine is a country here, right? Ukraine is a country of more or less 40 million people, 45 million people, and it is estimated that around 1/4 of the population left their houses, left their places of living, and escaped. So around 11 million people escaped their places of living in Ukraine. They mostly moved from eastern Ukraine to western Ukraine, and around 8 million people, so it's quite a lot, right? 8 million people left Ukraine in the 2022-2023. And because of the geography, most of them moved to Poland or used Poland as a transit country to another country. So for instance, as I said, in 2022-2023, around 8 million people escaped Ukraine. Some of them, since the war somehow stabilized, right? Of course, there are still fightings, there are still people fighting, but mostly in eastern Ukraine. as a result of it, some of those Ukrainians decided to come back to Ukraine, but some of them decided to stay in another countries, right? And because of the geography, most of them decided to stay in Poland or in Germany. Currently, it is estimated that among those few million Ukrainians who escaped their country after 2022, more than 1 million lives in Poland and 1 million lives in Germany. Another big numbers are also in Czech Republic, also in Slovakia, also in Hungary, and also in a small country of Moldova, and also in Romania, right? So those neighboring country of Ukraine, and also Germany as the country of settlement of those Ukrainians. And as I said, it is interesting to observe that this was the biggest movement of people after Second World War in Europe. Okay, we are slowly coming to the end. I want to give you some time for questions if you have some, or some comments, or I would like you to express also your perception of the migrant situation in Spain in a moment. But some concluding words, okay, regarding immigration. Here you've got a map of Poland. It doesn't tell you nothing, but it is interesting just to observe that here we've got a map of density of migrants in a given regions of Poland before the war in Ukraine and as a result of war in Ukraine. What you can see? You can see that, I mean, the darker color, the bigger density of migrants in a particular regions, right? Here, this is the capital region of Warsaw. Here is my region. But you can see that those colors doesn't change much between before the war and after war, right? What does it mean? It means that even in a situation of war, because as I said, before the war we had already substantial immigration to Poland from Ukraine, mostly from Ukraine. There were around 2 million Ukrainians before the war who worked in Poland. And as a result of war, we had another 1 million. But the density, the numbers in particular regions doesn't change much. What does it mean? It means that even when there is a war and new people are coming, they are coming to the same regions as there were migrants before, right? In other words, it means that there are so-called migration networks. So people are coming to the places where already migrants are, right? Mostly to the bigger cities. So for instance, if before the war there were mostly people living in Warsaw, in the capital of Poland, Ukrainian people, even if new people are coming, for instance because of war, they would also mostly go to Warsaw, right? To the bigger cities. Why? Because whenever migrants are coming to the new place, they are choosing the places that were already chosen before by their, for instance, families, by their people they know, right? This is what migrant scholars call migration networks, right? Why is that? Because simply, even if you escape your country because of war, you are thinking about where to go. You are using your contacts. You are asking the people you know that they live, for instance, in Poland or in Spain, and ask where to go, right? And they would recommend you, oh, go there because there are some possibilities, right? And this is the same everywhere. So people are mostly moving to the places where migrants are already in, right? Okay, and to summarize what was happening in Poland, maybe I will just skip because that will be the end. So when we are talking about situation of Ukrainians or migrants in Poland, we could observe kind of a unusual situation, because you could imagine that in 2022 Poland was already an immigration country, but there were mostly those labor migrants coming. And labor migrants are quite those who do not need much support, in other words, because people are coming to the country and they are supposed to take care of themselves, right? Simply. In the first period, of course, I'm talking about. So they are coming to the country and they are expected to find a job, to support themselves. But this is a different situation with forced migrants, like refugees. And Poland was a country that experienced the largest inflow of refugees in the contemporary history of Europe. Of course, nowadays, as I said, Spain is observing a big inflow of migrants, including also refugees, but it was a different scale because, for instance, in 2022, when the war in Ukraine started, as I said, among those 8 million people who escaped Ukraine, most of them came to Poland. So, for instance, over 4 million people appeared in the first months of war in Poland, of Ukrainian refugees. And it was a difficult situation, because it meant that around 10% of new population appeared in the country, right? So you can imagine that country has 40 million people, and then a new extra 4 million people appears, right, in the country. So 10%. So what to do in this situation? Well, the situation is difficult, right? Because you have extra 10% of new population. So first of all, and here you've got what could be presented as a kind of a response of Polish state, of Polish society to immigrants, to especially Ukrainian refugees. The first, what happened was a so-called humanitarian aid, right? So everybody was surprised, everybody was shocked what has happened, because immediately 4 million people appeared. So the state was also surprised. The state was not prepared for this kind of situation. So what happened? They initiated the so-called, they not initiated, but the society itself initiated humanitarian aid, right? So in the first months or first weeks of Ukrainian forced immigration to Poland, there were mostly volunteers and NGOs who were responsible for support Ukrainian migrants. The state was simply shocked. The state was not prepared. So in the beginning, mostly Ukrainian migrants were supported by individuals, by volunteers, by NGOs, right, non-governmental organizations. Then, after a few weeks, the state started to also initiate some support. They, beside a basic financial and accommodation support, they started also to organize access to different services. So, for instance, education, to accommodation, to healthcare, and so on and so on. And basically, as a result of it, but only Ukrainian refugees can access to basically the same services and other than Polish nationals. In other words, Ukrainian refugees in Poland now, more or less 1 million people, are privileged in contrast to other migrants. So for instance, if there is any Ukrainian who came before the war, the person has less support than the one who came to Poland as a result of war. And of course, this person has also more access to different support than, for instance, I don't know, Colombians who are also coming to Poland nowadays. Because they are those who need more protection, right? Because they are the refugees, they are those who suffered from war. Of course, basically, this is causing some tensions. This is causing some tensions between migrants, but mostly in relation to the Polish society, because Poland received a big number of immigrants in a very short period of time, and among Polish people, this is in the beginning there was a big support. As I said, in the first weeks of war, migrants were mostly supported by individuals, by volunteers. Nowadays, the situation has changed, and less and less people are supporting Ukrainians and other migrants. At the same time, of course, this is the situation that fuels also growing right-wing politicians, right? And as I said, Poland is not an exception from what is happening in other countries, like Germany, like Czech Republic, like Hungary, like France, like Italy, that the government is more right than left. And the only exception would be probably, as I said, Spain. And this migration, as I said, is a big thing that influences not only economic situation, not only social situation, but also political situation, right? We can observe throughout Europe a growing right-wing extremist, far-right politicians, and migration is one of the reasons why it is like that, right? Migration as a factor that fuels this growing right-wing politicians. Of course, migration is crucial for economic development of countries. Without migration, this would be not possible to maintain our standard of living. And of course, this is also inevitable part of globalization, inevitable part of free movement of people around the European Union. The societies are making diverse more and more, but at the same time we can observe a growing political response, right? Negative response, right? So growing extremist far-right parties. And it is quite probable that in the next elections in Germany, in France, those far-right parties will get to power, and they will use migration as a reason to justify their positions, right? Which is not a good prospect for Europe. And that would be and this is what I would like to finish now. And I would like to now ask you, what is the perspective of Spanish people on immigration, and how it is possible that Spanish government, so to say, is opposing this negative European tendency? Thank you.
¿Qué pensáis?
Or maybe you have some other questions, something was not clear.
In Spain there are a lot of different opinions about immigration.
Yeah. It's the issue of migration is actually the concern of I didn't have time to show it, but maybe I will show you now. So again, some data from Eurostat, so European Statistical Office, right? And Eurostat is conducting each year the so-called Eurobarometer. Eurobarometer is Eurobarometer is public opinion poll, right? Asking within which different questions are asked. And I have just data from 2018 because that was the I wanted to refer to some other issue, so just from 2018. Now it's not difficult. Now it's not important because the situation hasn't changed much. But let's look at this data. This is Eurobarometer, so public opinion poll that was taken in whole European Union, right? And the question was, what do you think are the two most important issues facing the EU at the moment, right? And as you can see, immigration was the biggest concern Europeans have, right? And it was like that 2018. Then it has changed a bit because there was in 2022, 2023, because there was this Russian assault on Ukraine, and since then, of course, this safety, the feeling of safety is lower than it used to be. So this war is of course crucial also. But immigration is still one of the top two or top three biggest concerns Europeans have, and you can observe it also throughout years how it was. So, for instance, in 2011, the biggest concern was economic situation, and it was as a result of the so-called European crisis that appeared in the late 2000s and 2010s, 2008, especially Spain and Portugal and Italy especially suffered from that, right? And Greece, but of course it affected all Europe. So at that time, economic situation was the biggest concern. But since then, immigration is, as I said, one of top three biggest concerns Europeans have. So, as you said, Spanish people have different opinions, but it's the same, I would say, in different countries. Also, if you ask about immigration. The same would be in Germany, the same would be in UK. As I said, one of the reasons, or as many say, the biggest reason why British people decided to leave EU was immigration. There was, as you said before, a moral panic around immigration from, for instance, Poland to UK. I don't know if you have been to UK, but Polish people are the second largest minority, so to say, in UK, right? Because after 2004, when Poland joined EU, a lot of people escaped Poland and moved to UK. As a reaction of it, British people said, "Stop! We want to leave EU because they are bringing us immigrants, and we do not want them." Right? Now we know that British people are not so anymore. Positive about Brexit, about being out of EU. Probably there are some information that there are some polls showing that they would like to rejoin the EU. But what I want to say is that those reactions are, as you said, in Spain, or these concerns, these discussions about immigration are quite similar in every European Union country, but the reaction, at least at the voting polls, at the voting ballots, may be different, right? And Spanish people are at the moment totally different than the rest of Europe. So my question would be, how is it possible? How it is possible that Spanish people vote different than Germans, than Polish, than French people, right? What do you think? Yes, please.
It's because people see here like their political party as their football team. So like most of the voters of one specific party, unless that party absolutely destroys themselves from the inside, they probably aren't going to change their vote whatsoever.
Mm-hmm.
So I think Spain is not voting right now the same way of Europe because of that way, because the two most important parties, their large majority of the voters go to vote as if it was the football team. They are just not going to change because and I know how to explain it. They are not going to change their vote
Mm-hmm.
even if they have done something bad.
Ah, okay. So you mean that that your voting attitude is very stable, that you vote all time the same, right?
Yeah, generally. Yeah.
Okay. Because because of course in other countries is that the people are moving from one party to another party, right? And they are changing it quite easily, right? But tendency is of course towards far right, right? It is probable that, as I said, of course, the biggest countries of Europe are currently France and Germany, right? And of course, what is happening there is the most important from the European Union perspective, so to say, and we can probably expect that there will be far-right politicians running those countries, right? So, which is probably not a good prospect, but yeah, it is. Yeah. So this was. But maybe some of you have some other opinions. Why is that like that in Spain? What do you think? Because as you said, because as I showed you, Spain throughout its history, throughout latest 20-30 years, transformed also from the country that was not so much immigration country to the country that is currently the largest immigration country, right? Of course, this big immigration started in 1990, but in the meantime, there were countries that received larger immigration, and now it's the Spain, the top one, right? So, and the reaction is still quite unusual, we would say. So maybe some of you have some other observation why it is like that. How do people react? Because of course, on the one hand, there is an immigration from as we said, culturally close countries of South America, right? Language similar or the same language in those countries, right? But on the other hand, you have also some tensions on your southern border, right? With Africa, on those small islands also, right? And how do people react to that in general? What would you say? Because many, I showed you the what is happening on the border of Poland and Belarus, right? On the one hand, there is a big immigration, and people are actually positive about it because there are coming people, and there are people coming. There are people who can, I don't know, provide us with cheaper services, right? Because immigration is always about diminishing costs, right? Because now I have cheaper access to some services, right? As a result of immigration. and this is good. Finally, I have a person who can support me. Finally, I have a person who can be a nurse, who can be a support to my children, I can easily have to I don't know, do a construction work and so on and so on. It's good, right? People are keen on that. They accept it. But at the same time, we have a situation on the Polish-Belarusian border where people from the Middle East are used as a weapon in a hybrid war, right? And there are some also observations that, for instance, some North African regimes are using also migrants in their international relations with European Union, right? Or Turkey, for instance, also is using migrants in their relations with EU as a kind of a tool in exerting, in achieving some positive goals, right? For instance, after this crisis in 2015, European migrant crisis, it immediately finished because Europe paid money to Turkey to stop this immigration, right? And for instance, now, every single year, every few years, there are agreements signed by European Union with Morocco, with Tunisia, with other Northern African countries to stop immigration from that country, right? Some call it that it is a blackmail of European Union, right? So how the Spanish people look at that? What the Spanish people think about it?
I think that the weight of immigration isn't the same in Europe because of Spain have an open immigration policy.
Yeah.
Compared to other Europe countries, and it affects a lot of things. So, yeah.
Mm-hmm. But again, yes, of course. But Poland also had a very open immigration policy. As I said, Poland was the country that received the largest number of immigrants through the past years, right? Through the past years, the numbers of migrants coming was also the largest to Poland as a result of open immigration policy, right? But then it's changed. And in Spain, it doesn't change somehow. And this is my question: why, how it is possible? You know, this would be. Of course, I know that you are not able to answer such a complex question, and nobody knows how to explain it probably so easily. But as I said, Spain is in this kind of in this context a very different, and it's good, right? Because you have a different than this right-wing path, right? But it's also interesting to observe it. Do you have any other questions? Any other things to raise? Yeah, please.
We saw a map that is about immigrants that are after and during the war in Poland.
Yeah.
I want to know if it's expected that this number of immigrants will change if the war ends in the future.
Well, basically, you mean this, right? This one? Basically, the situation is already has changed a bit. Of course, I do not have much time, and this is a complex issue, but I wanted to just show here that before the war, people were coming here, and as a result of war, also the people were mostly coming to the same areas, right? and it is also typical. This is a typical migration situation. It's also the same in Spain. It's also probably the same in France and in every country, that people are mostly coming to the areas that are the best developed, right? Migrants. So they will mostly go to Madrid, to Barcelona, to Valencia, to another places. That would be their first choice, right? Then they may go to another place. And this is the same situation in Poland. That people are going, that before the war they were coming to the areas that are the most developed, and even refugees are coming to the same areas that are the most developed because the possibilities there are the best, right? But what is interesting is that Poland, of course, it's one of the, as I showed you, okay, in 2024 it was the Spain that was the most popular, but Poland was still among the most attractive countries, right, for migrants. But there are no, still Ukrainians are the largest number of migrants in Poland. But their number is diminishing year by year. There are less and less Ukrainians. First, because Ukraine has a serious demographic problem. Demographic problem means that there are less and less young people who are able and ready to go. Because as you look at, and it's also a typical migration phenomenon, migrants are mostly people, young ones, right? Mostly. Because young people are those who are having the biggest troubles with getting to the labor market, right? So, for instance, once you finish your education, you either smoothly go to the labor market and you get a job, or, for instance, you go abroad, right? And this is a typical situation. So, migrants are mostly younger than the rest of the population. And in Ukraine now we have a problem because they are facing the population. There are less and less people, less and less people, and simply not so many people are interested to go to emigrate. Not only because of war, but because of the economic situation, right? So at the same time in Poland we are observing still a big demand for labor force, because as I said, the economic situation is really good. The unemployment rate is small, so there is a big demand, and since Ukrainians are not coming, Polish companies are looking for others. And for instance, besides Ukrainians, beside other post-Soviet Union countries like Belarusians, like Russians, I don't know, people from Armenia, Georgia, Azerbaijan and other countries, the next group would be people from South Asia, so from Nepal, from Pakistan, from Bangladesh and other countries. And the third large group would be South Americans, Colombians and Venezuelans. And actually, year by year, we are observing a growing number of people coming from South Africa to Poland. And actually, most of them are coming through Spain. So I know that you have a visa-free movement, right? With some, I don't know if with all, but with at least part of the South American countries, right? And those people who are coming to Spain, in a quite substantial numbers, are moving to Poland. I mean, from Colombia, from Venezuela, from other countries. But the problem is that those people are facing big troubles with integration, and actually they are exploited. Because there's a different situation if you have a migrant from Ukraine who speaks a similar language, who is a Slavic, who looks the same, who behaves the same. And you have a different situation when there is a person coming from Colombia to, you know, harsh Polish country, who looks different, who speaks different language, and actually we can observe that Colombians and Venezuelans are subjects to exploitation, because then they do not speak Polish, they do not speak similar language, they do not speak English, they just speak Spanish. And with Spanish language in Poland you can do nothing. With English you can do it, right? But with Spanish you can do nothing. And actually it's sad to say so, but we can observe that in some rural areas there are some, I don't know, factories, or some meat factories, or some agricultural factories. Quite a lot. There are some numbers of South Americans who are coming to work, and they are being exploited. They are being caught. Their passports are being taken, and they just work in a very, very difficult, very tragic situations, and they are simply being exploited. Some people are even claiming that they are kind of a work camps, you know. And actually, there are a lot of, maybe not a lot, but the problem is growing, and there are some volunteers and some NGOs and some human rights watchers who are paying attention, more and more attention to this fact that migrants from South America in Europe, in Poland, are subject to exploitation, which is sad, but you know, those companies do not pay attention to that, because this is a cheap labor force, right? Okay. So I guess that would be it, right? If you, in the end, of course I didn't say everything I wanted to say, but if you have any other questions, you may always contact me. This is my email contact. So if you like, you may always contact. So thank you very much. I guess we have still 2 minutes till the end of class. So that would be it. Thank you very much, and good luck, and yeah.